Here in the United States, we still do not know who will be the president for the next 4 years. What we do know, though, is that the Democrats, the media elite, that rabble on the streets, they have all picked this 100% wrong. You've been told incessantly by pollsters, by academics, by most of the media that this was a runaway train for Joe Biden, that the Democrats were going to sweep back, not just take the White House, but take the Senate as well. As it stands now, Donald Trump is best placed to serve a second term. Look at the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. He's ahead in all three of those. If he wins two, he can't be defeated by Joe Biden. We won't get an answer to this tonight, but rather predictably, Joe Biden, fearing that Donald Trump would come out tonight and claim victory, Joe Biden came out to say, hey, hold your horses, hold your horses. A lot of votes to count. No one should be claiming victory tonight. Have a look at Joe Biden here.
Keep the faith, guys. We're going to win this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your patience is great.
That is Joe Biden. He came out and spoke to the media, not something he does a hell of a lot, of course, at 12:30. That is half past midnight in the United States, a short speech, as I said, essentially to try and cut off Donald Trump from claiming victory. We expect to hear from Donald Trump sometime soon. So while we can't say for certain who the winner will be, and we've told you for many, many days that this is likely to be the case, that we're likely to have a night where there is no declared winner, where we have to wait for more counting, where we could possibly face some court challenges in the future. This is what we've been looking at, and this is what has transpired. But unless you've been watching this station in Australia, you won't have known that any of this was coming. The issue here is that while we don't know who's won the election, we do know who the winners are out of this contest. The winner here is democracy. The winner here is mainstream people and mainstream values. They haven't fallen for the nonsense that the media elite and the Democrats have pushed at them. They were telling us that Donald Trump would be swept aside, but they've decided to vote with their own values, with their own preferences in mind. We've seen this in Australia reflected as well, of course, that Donald Trump was a racist, Donald Trump was a sexist, Donald Trump was a misogynist, and that people who voted for him were deplorable. Well, the people have spoken today in America, and they've decided to side with Donald Trump for a number of reasons, because they like law and order rather than giving a nudge and a wink to violent protesters on the street. They've decided to say they like jobs and cheap energy rather than America signing up to the Paris Agreement or banning fracking and the like. They've decided to vote for mainstream values. They've decided to vote in their droves for a president, instead of taking a knee for Black Lives Matter, decides that he will try and provide jobs and education for African Americans. So this has been a big win for mainstream values against the elites. It's been a big win for democracy against a media push and a so-called elites push to tell them what they were going to do. And I've got to tell you, if you weren't watching Sky News in Australia, this will all come as an absolute surprise to you, because the media and the pollsters have all been telling us that Joe Biden was going to win this in a landslide. So many people have got this wrong. Again, they got it wrong in 2016, then they got Brexit wrong, then they got Scott Morrison wrong, and now they've got this wrong. Yet they've still all got jobs, and they continue to commentate with their jaundiced and biased views, misleading their audiences and turning their backs on the mainstream values that drive a country like America and that drive a country like ours too, back in Australia. There was a great example of this tonight on Fox News here in the US. While they were looking at some of the results coming in, they were speaking to some mainstream American voters about what issues drove their vote this time around. Have a listen to Janet from Atlanta, Georgia, an African-American woman from Atlanta, Georgia, a place where the Democrats, campaigning led there by former President Barack Obama, they thought they might tip Georgia by appealing to African-Americans. Have a listen to what Janet had to say.
I really think that the Democrats they're probably missing on the things that are most important when it comes to law and order, the support of our police, some of the policies. I think that they're missing on the finer points of things. that they're not as detailed. Democrats have a tendency to see things in a monolithic way and not realizing that there are many parts of a whole. So I think that is their problem.
There you go. Go figure. You know, suburban people who want to do the best thing for their family and they want a secure future, they go for things like jobs, education and law and order. Too much identity politics tries to second-guess people. This is the big lesson out of this election. Whether it's a narrow loss for Donald Trump or a win, which at this stage I would say is a bit more likely, then the lesson is that those mainstream values won't be taken for granted. They won't be lectured to by the so-called elites in the media. And the media keeps getting this stuff wrong because they are telling you what they hope will happen rather than what's happening on the ground. All of this has been so clear to us as we've travelled around America in the last 10 days. But, of course, you don't have to do that. If you read and look and listen, you can see this unfolding. I want to give you another example of this because Joe Biden has not campaigned much, as you know. He's tried to stay out of the campaign. But what he has tried to do is portray himself as a fairly moderate left-of-centre politician. He has suggested that he won't rock the boat so much. We told you a week ago that his comments on phasing out the oil industry and the gas industry were going to create all sorts of problems in Texas and Pennsylvania for him, and that has turned out to be the case. But what he's tried to do is suggest that he's not really driven by the radical left agenda, even though he was going to rejoin Paris and bring in these big energy, renewable energy policies. But the game was given away a couple of days ago by Bernie Sanders, the hard left candidate who tried to get the Democrat nomination the last two times around. Here's Bernie Sanders in an online forum with some other leftist Democrat politicians. And listen to what he says, what they were planning to do after the win. They wanted, of course, Joe Biden to win. We'll see if that happens. But if he wins, they want to push him to do more on healthcare, to do more on climate change, to do more in their criminal justice policy areas, which is basically taking the side of protesters against the police. Have a listen to what they're planning to do if Joe Biden gets the White House.
Our first task, we got to defeat the worst president in the modern history of this country. And number two, we organize our people to make sure that Biden becomes the most progressive president since FDR. That's what I'm envisaging.
Yep, they just want to push him harder and harder to the left on these policies. So forget about the moderate facade. The Democrats want to push a Democrat president to a hard left agenda. Now, just before we go to more assessments of what's going on here, and we're waiting to hear from Donald Trump as well, I want to show you some of what Donald Trump said today. He turned up in Arlington, just outside of Washington, here to thank his campaign staff. And I found this really insightful, actually, because for the first time in this campaign, I think for the first time in his political career, we heard Donald Trump actually countenance the prospect of failing, actually countenance the prospect of losing. And the other thing he did was focus on unity in this nation. Have a look.
No, I'm not thinking about concession speech or acceptance speech yet. Hopefully we'll be only doing one of those two. And, you know, winning is easy. Losing is never easy. Not for me, it's not. But I think we have, when you see rallies, the likes of which in the history of this country, probably in the history of the world, nobody's ever seen before, there's a tremendous love going on in this country. And there's really a tremendous unity.
How about that, hey? Donald Trump actually saying that he could lose. Now, at the moment, it looks like he could win, but I found those comments encouraging if, in the end, the counting does turn against him and the legal challenges fall aside, then hopefully he would do so gracefully and talk about national unity. Let's hope the Democrats would do the same if they lose this. Remember, they've railed against the result from 2016 onwards, so we need graceful losers' consent from one side or the other here. But in the end, I think what we've seen here, as I said, the victory here is the way that Donald Trump has represented the mainstream, the outsiders versus the insiders. He's represented mainstream voters against bureaucrats. He's been much more interested in workers than journalists. And this is something that's worked well for him. And he's got that measure of endorsement from Middle America at the moment. Let's see if it's enough to keep him in the White House for another 4 years.